Welcome back, ladies, gentlemen, and all else to this year's Halloween special. It's that chilling time of the year again, and this year, I have collected 13 interesting stories for you all, and we will go through them together on this very special day. This year, the entries will not really be numbered by scariness. I like all of these stories basically all the same, so see this as more of a collection of intriguing creepypastas, rather than a definitive list counting down to the most frightening ones. These are all good short stories that I hope you will enjoy on this Halloween night, and if you do like them, make sure you check them out in the description below and give the authors kind words. Let's begin as we go through the top 13 creepypastas of 2019. Number 13. Jars. I'm sitting here in the dark and looking at all the jars. They circle around me like gathered priests, offering quiet, whispered benedictions. Round, squared, squat. There are dozens, each filled with the same murky fluid, all soft gray, pulsing and flowing in time to a subtle, silent heartbeat. Things move in them. Gray, red, pink. Small, with eyes that swivel in their sockets, staring idiotically. They spend all of their time staring at me. I see their mouths moving, filling with fluid, exhaling the brine, mouthing the same word over and over again. I suppose that I shouldn't spend so much time here in the cool darkness, that in some way, the world outside keeps moving while I sit here, tears flowing down my cheeks, watching them. Well, soon I will have to leave. It has been precious months since I added to their number, summer gone away to make room for dead fall. The tree is bearing ripe fruit, and it will be wasted if I'm not on hand to pluck it from the branch. I stand finally, drying my cheeks with the back of my delicate hand, wiping away any last chance of letting my sorrow intervene with a necessary task. My thin scrubs are nothing against the chill here, and my flesh is peppered with what the cold does. Time to go. I planted the seed, and now comes the harvest. Turning, I give a last sideways glance and whisper, "I will see you soon." They still mouth silently, but I know what they are saying, over and over. Father. Number 12. Grandma's Ashes. Grandma's house used to be filled with ordinary people like you and me. She died a week ago, leaving behind a legacy as one of the finest mediums in all the county. She gave comfort and reassurance to all those who suffered the vulnerability of lost loved ones, even though my parents never quite believed it. As requested, Grandma was cremated, and her ashes settled in a colorful jar atop the windowsill in view of her beloved garden. Her video will, though, requested one last unsettling thing: that her ashes be put into an oil lamp and be used as light. Oddly enough, we obliged to this request, half expecting the ashes to smother the flame and render our lamp useless. We gathered around our kitchen table. I poured the ashes into the oil beneath. A flame quipped up quite shockingly. We took back everything we said about crazy old Grandma at that moment. Her ashes burned a flame that raided the room with the grotesque faces of the undead. First tens, then thousands, swarming our home with their gaping mouths and their empty eyes. All surrounding, approaching the pebble of a flame dancing out the tip of the oil lamp. Weeks on, the flame still burns, and we're all afraid to put it out. Number 11. Runaways. It was the middle of the night when I went to check on the children. They should have been sound asleep, but they were nowhere to be seen. I called out into the darkness of my home in hoping that they would respond and put an end to the intense anxiety which filled my mind and body. There was nothing but silence. I couldn't call anyone. There was nothing to do but search and hope. I found the front door had been left ajar. My home is surrounded by woods for miles in every direction, so even then I had not exactly narrowed down Cassie and Ben's location. As I got dressed and put on my boots to go out in search of them, I was furious at their misbehavior. It took me the rest of the night to track them down. When I did find them, they were still in their tattered pajamas and sleeping beneath an old weeping willow. They had tired their little bodies out. I threw the boy and the girl over my broad shoulders and was met with only a little resistance. I suppose they knew how very angry I was. My children were wise in that respect. When I got them back home, I made sure to double check the lock on their cage. There would be no more escaping. Those two were my favorite of all my little playthings. Number 10. What I see when you're asleep. This used to be my house. Not too long ago, but just enough to where it's at the point in my mind that I can't pinpoint when exactly. You sleep in my room. My old room. Your bed is in a different placement than mine was. I prefer to be beside the far wall next to the closet, but I take it you fancy a window view. I can respect that. You've decorated it with posters and pictures and sticky notes, which is good. Makes everything feel a touch more alive. You're sleeping right now. You look peaceful, which is different than when you're awake, because then you typically look sad. You're breathing softly, your nose whistling between, and every few minutes your mouth twitches, and you shift the duvet further up your shoulders. There's a radio on the sill above your head. Bathed in moonlight, the little black box plays tunes that I loved. The songs I listened to growing up. Sometimes, if I close my eyes and really focus, I can pretend that nothing's changed. I can pretend it's me laying on my back on the floor, the smooth carpet tickling my cheeks as I count the cracks in the ceiling. They're still there, but you've covered them up with cheap glowing plastic stars. And paint, which in the afternoon sun is a golden yellow, but at night under the moon's sallow eyes it's a muted green-gray. The sheets rustle and your breathing hitches. You're turning away from me. Making my way closer to you, I reach a hand out and gently tuck your hair behind your ear. It's soft and silky. You must take pretty good care of yourself, huh? At least, that's what it must seem like to someone who doesn't know you like I do. And not to toot my own horn or anything, but I think I know you pretty well by now. I know that you love Johnny Depp movies, but can't stand Crybaby. I know you only started listening to The Cure and The Smiths and other bands like that because ever since you were a child, you've wanted to fit in. I remember those days, back when your family first moved in. I didn't like you very much then, but I'll admit, you've grown on me. Your parents are snoring in the other room. It gets pretty loud some nights, but that's why you like to have the radio playing. It helps you to lose yourself to sleep and not let distractions and noises and thoughts keep you up, right? Because being awake makes you sad sometimes, right? I get it, truly I do. I think we would have been really good friends. If I was still alive, that is. Number 9. Fetid Cage. As I walked nervously to the stairs, my sleeve brushed along the rusted bars of her cage, and to my absolute horror, she awoke. A frail voice resonated from the stagnant corner, that ancient fetid prison that had laid untouched for over a decade, and kept us safe from the unimaginable hate within. As her words began to form, interjected by that awful wheezing, a cold sweat crept through my body. I should not have come through here. I should have stayed upstairs.
Daddy, please, let me out. Just for a minute.
Her voice was almost human. Choking back the tears, I resolved to ignore her. This was not my daughter. Don't turn on the lights, I told myself, and walked away. As the voice got louder, the cage began to rattle, banging and scraping, deepening that familiar indent in the wall.
How could you do this, Papa?
She had never called me Papa when she was alive. I lit a cigarette with trembling hands and made my way up the steps. Turning the basement door handle, I paused for a moment as the room fell silent. And then I heard something I'd never heard before. The sound of the cage opening. Number 8. A Halloween monster. Come on, Jackie. Only kids like you have to be brave, because they have no big brothers or big sisters to protect them. Daddy's words repeated in my head, and I swallowed before trying again. My feet shook as they made their way up the creaky wooden steps. A layer of fog rolled and twirled around my legs, illuminated by orange lights that shone from fires held within devil faces. One step howled loudly, catching me off guard and forcing me to hurry back down to the safety of the stone path below. Though, it wasn't too much better down here. There were wispy skeletons moving about, and when one reached for me, I was hurried back onto the steps. This time my climb was greeted by a door opening. There was no bright, welcoming light that rushed to escape into the night. Rather, only tiny little bulbs of purple and green and orange shone within the darkness and nothing more. Only when the shadow hurried forth did I scream and stumble back yet again, my suspense broken by the approaching figure. "Well, hello there," the creature spoke. My lip quivered and I was unable to respond. Its pale white face shook me deeply, standing out entirely on its own from the large black cloak it wore. "What do you say?" Was all I could muster before running from the house. A pair of arms interrupted my escape, quickly grabbing my fairy princess dress and hoisting me upwards. "Oh, there, Jacqueline," Uncle Hugh whispered, rubbing my back slowly as I cried out. Tears ran down my frightened face for the millionth time tonight, ruining any remaining makeup Mommy had put on. Uncle Hugh then did something that made me freeze up in terror. He called out to the monster. "Hey, do you think you could come out here? She's a little frightened." My heart started to race rapidly as I heard footsteps clicking along the pathway behind me. I thrust my eyes into my uncle's shoulder, trying to hide from the beast, but when he told me to look, I was turned around to meet it once more. My cries echoed through the neighborhood once again as the monster laughed, its pearly white fangs matching perfectly with its face. "Oh, I'm sorry, dearie. Here, have some extra for being such a brave girl." The monster then stretched out the opening of my bag and dumped in 2 big chocolate bars and a bag of chips. "What do you say, Jackie?" Uncle Hugh asked. "Thank you," I mumbled before hiding my face again. I knew the candy was free, but having to approach these terrifying monsters to get it was just too much. At least there were only a few houses left. Uncle Hugh set me down beside the car and opened the door for me to get in. Daddy was still sleeping in the back seat. I couldn't wait to show him all the candy I'd gotten when he woke up. Uncle Hugh told me not to disturb him right now though, or else he might get angry. After I was buckled in and the car started to move, I began thinking about what Daddy had told me about being brave. It seemed odd now, considering how Uncle Hugh was here taking me out trick-or-treating. After all, I always thought Daddy taught me that phrase, because he was an only child too. Number 7. Fall asleep. The nurse gently lays me back on the surgical bed. The paper covering rustles slightly and brushes uncomfortably against the exposed skin of my arms and thighs. I shift a little in an attempt to make myself more comfortable. My face must clearly be reflecting how much my stomach is churning for the procedure ahead, as the nurse asks if I need a bag. I take a deep breath to try and steady my nerves. The odd scent of various chemicals and cleaning solvents doesn't help, but I still decline her offer. She nods and places the rubbery, transparent mask over my nose and mouth. There's a soft hiss as the gas flows through the tubes and invades my lungs. The nurse counts down from 10. My mind blacks out before she reaches 5. Awareness slowly returns to me as I lay on the bed. That hadn't been too bad, I muse idly. My head feels heavy, and as I see no reason to move yet, I let myself remain still in the relative silence of the recovery room. The door to the room opens and several people come walking into the room. A brief draft brushes over my arms before it closes. The nurses most likely come to check on my status. I open my eyes to show that I am awake. My eyelids refuse to obey. Concern begins to wash over me and I try to open my mouth to call them. When my jaws remain locked together, I try to move my limbs. Panic sets in with full force now, as the individuals take up position around my bed. A voice that I recognize as the one belonging to the surgeon speaks up. "If everybody is ready, let us proceed with the operation." Number 6. Lifecycle. The first thing you notice probably won't worry you much, just another flaw in the wall, or maybe a bump in the plaster that you hadn't paid attention to before. It might even look like a shadow. If you're observant, you might see it move, but you might not. It's usually too late by the time you get scared. Your walls will be covered in them. Little bumps like in an old house. They move around like beetles, incredibly fast, writhing and skittering over each other. You may not think the exact word, but the concept will almost definitely occur to you. Infected. And it's not so far off, although colonized might be closer. The thing is, they exist in alternating generations. The first lives in your walls. When you see them, you're witnessing their death throes. They'll be gone soon. They die after reproducing. And one day, you'll wake up and you just won't feel right. Not sick exactly, just off. Nervous and jittery, like there's something crawling around under your skin. A few days later, you'll realize there is something crawling around under your skin. The doctors won't believe you though. You'll get used to the word psychosomatic. You'll insist they're wrong. First politely, then urgently, then screaming in their faces as you feel yourself being eaten alive, but they won't listen to you. Maybe at home, maybe at the hospital, you'll start to feel lethargic. When you try to move, you're slow and clumsy. A few hours later, you'll realize you aren't tired. You're paralyzed. You can try to get help, but there's really no point. They all release the neurotoxin at once. Even if you make it, whoever you call will never understand you. You should probably close your eyes at that point, while you still can, because then they're going to start burrowing out of your skin. Number 5. Anomalous Weather. The alarm began early in the morning for you. Your mother and father gathered around the television with you as blaring beeps sprung out. The robot voice holds ultimate authority now.
This is a severe weather alert being broadcasted at the request of the National Weather Service. At approximately 0700 hours CST, an unusual tropical storm was located 900 miles off the east coast of the United States. The storm is unusual in that it appears to be made of canine appendages and tissue, and is rapidly approaching inland with significant turbulence. All residents are advised to stay inside and barricade doors and windows if unable to evacuate within the next 4 hours. The storm's speed has considerable force, and damage inflicted by raining dog parts have already been reported as far as Maine, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. Do not approach projectiles while they are still animate. Do not attempt to chase down runaway pets.
A little confused, your parents look out the window. You live in Chicago, and indeed, turbulent rain began to pelt the asphalt. But what's this about dogs? What does that have to do with anything?
This is a continuous severe weather alert being broadcasted at the request of the National Weather Service. At approximately 0740 hours CST, the irregular tropical storm breached inland. The eye of the storm currently is above Pennsylvania, with turbulence extending as far as Chicago and South Carolina. Insulation of all openings, including doors and windows leading into your home, is recommended. Citizens owning any domestic canines are urgently requested to leave them outside. Do not let them in. Ignore any and all vocalizations, intelligible or otherwise.
Your blood runs cold. This is a sick joke, isn't it? Someone must have hijacked the broadcast during a storm of all things. The nerve. You don't notice quite yet that the sky outside has darkened and turned a mushy shade of red. Somewhere down the street, a woman faintly shrieks. The rain gets heavier.
This is a continuous severe weather alert being broadcasted at the request of the National Weather Service. This broadcast will continue until all severely anomalous weather has ceased. Isolate all domestic canines. Do not let them in. Seal every crack leading to the outside. Ignore all vocalizations from outside until the storm has passed. If possible, send loved ones to lower levels of your homes. Do not leave your homes. Do not leave your homes. Do not leave your homes.
Thick, heavy impacts can be heard from outside. Cautiously, your father goes to open the front door window a crack to see how bad the storm has become. As he does, you watch in absolute horror as a grimy red paw somehow worms its way in, underneath the door. It is muddy with rain and viscera, and bone shines underneath the fur. The scratching and howling that accompanies it is unbearable and innumerable. Number 4. Poisonous. You eat food, right? Every human does, but do you inspect each morsel of food you eat? I doubt you do. I don't think anyone does. I could say that is my advantage, but it's not. What really helps me is when you leave that meal in your fridge overnight, or even when you leave the room unattended. You may think I'm lying. I'm not. Ever see that flash of movement or something that isn't there? You might have seen me. Symptoms of my poison can include fever, headache, insomnia, and paranoia. These symptoms don't really kill much. I like to watch my victims squirm and go, well, insane. Yes, you may say I'm cruel, but I'm not. I only kill... Oh, did I say kill? Forget I said that. You may look for the poison, however, you may not find it. If you're eating something like a salad, you may not notice the little black flecks. However, if you're eating something like a tea or soup, you'll spot it earlier. Did I say earlier? Surely you misheard that. If you spot it, you may, however, incinerate that morsel because the poison spreads. It spreads much like mold. The spores spread. If you have spotted my plague, it's too late. You're already infected with it. After that, your teeth become loose. Only, however, if you have baby teeth left. You will feel pain. Not unbearable. You know what? I'm lying. There's no such thing as me, the poison, or any of the shenanigans I've mentioned. I distracted you. I could be behind you this very moment. Knife raised, glistening with blood, ready to sink into your neck. Or I could be hiding where you can't see. I also could be lying even more and be distracting you while I sneak some poison into your food. Ah, made you look. Don't be so paranoid. It's unhealthy. Number 3. I don't sleep anymore. Earlier this week on Sunday night, I had a dream in which I knew I was asleep. I was standing outside my house in torrential rain at night and thought I needed to get inside in order to wake up. I approached the front door and placed my knuckles onto the door window ready to knock. I knew that my next action would bring me one step closer to consciousness. The moment I knocked on the door, the thudding sound of the knock was so loud, so frightening, and so real that it woke me from my sleep. Bang, bang, bang. I jumped up immediately and listened out for a further knock at the door. I was roasting hot, sweating profusely, and my heart was beating so hard, I don't think I would have been able to tell the difference between a knock at the door and my thudding heartbeat. After I came to my senses and realized that the possibility of the door knocking at the exact moment of dreaming is incredibly low, I fell back to sleep. Monday the following night, I had the same dream. Right back outside the front of the house in the pouring rain again, intensely staring at the house. I slowly walked to the front door. This time it was open. I walked in and went straight into the kitchen. I opened the cutlery drawer and pulled out the largest meat knife I have. I looked into my reflection through the blade of the knife. If you stare directly into the reflection of your eyes for long enough, eventually it will hit you that someone is looking at you. You know it's your reflection, but just for a second, you forget and become self-conscious, as if it's somebody else behind your reflection's eyes. It didn't take a second of looking at my reflection through the blade to realize that somebody else was looking back. The moment I realized there was somebody else wearing my grin in the reflection, I slammed the cutlery drawer shut. Bang! Again, I shot up out of bed. The sound of the metal clanging in the drawer as it abruptly closed was so defined and so crystal clear, it couldn't have been a dream. Really spooked this time, I went downstairs into the kitchen. I was half asleep and had to check. I opened the cutlery drawer. I was relieved to find the knife still in the drawer. I closed it and went back to sleep. It took a little longer this time, but I fell asleep. Tuesday night, my dream started with that grin in the reflection. From the look in his eyes, I could tell that the man in the reflection knew he was looking back at someone confused and scared. I found myself looking into the reflection of the knife already in my hand, while I stood outside my house in the rain. The front door was open again. I walked into the house, directly up the stairs and into my bedroom. I looked at the bed and saw someone sleeping in it. It was me. I knew what I was going to do, but also knew that I couldn't stop myself. Instead, I kept thinking over and over again, wake up. My emotions were both in two extremes at once. I was terrified, but at the same time, I was thrilled and excited to kill. Wake up! I shot right out of bed and stood up. I was absolutely drenched in sweat, roasting hot, but relieved to find nobody stood in front of me with a knife. It took a few seconds to realize that I was gripping something tight in my hand. I knew what it was even before I looked down at it and saw my reflection in it. It was the meat knife, and this time the reflection in it looked terrified. I don't sleep anymore. Number 2. The doll. I gave her the doll on her birthday. She loved it at first and told me it was so beautiful, that its hair was so soft and the dress was so pretty. She wouldn't let it out of her sight for days. Through the daylight hours, she set it on the table, so she could see it while cleaning the house, and at nighttime, it sat next to the bed watching us sleep with big blue unmoving eyes. But my daughter's love for the doll soon changed. Soon I noticed something was bothering her. I asked, of course, but she wouldn't tell me at first. Said she was just being silly. I could notice that day after day she became more reserved towards me until I couldn't take it anymore. I pressed her, told her she would tell me what was going on right now or I would drag her to a doctor. She finally broke, and crying, the words came spilling out. She then told me it was the doll. It scared her. She told me she had the feeling it was constantly watching her. Sometimes it even seemed like it moved. This worried me, and I went to take a look at the doll. It sat motionless on the little table in the bedroom, the big blue eyes unchanged. I couldn't help but sigh from relief a bit. Of course she's not moving. She couldn't have been. I went to turn away, but then saw a tiny movement from the corner of my eye. I turned back to the doll, picking it up from the table. I held my face close to the doll's, staring into the eyes. Something was moving. I tried to concentrate, tried to look closer. Yes, there it definitely was. Movement. But not from the eye itself. It was behind the eye. Before I could register this, the eye burst, and out of it spilled at least 10 wriggling maggots. I dropped the doll in shock, backing away instinctively. My daughter yelled from the other room, asking me what was going on. I yelled back at her not to worry. I picked up the doll again, using a tissue to wipe away the maggots. Inside I saw more, pressing against the skin and plastic outer layer. So soon already. I had hoped she would have lasted longer. I will have to get a new one for her. Maybe keep it alive at first. That way it will last longer for sure. While I throw away the old doll, I think about how my daughter always says she loves the thick blonde curls of little Katie down the block. Doesn't she also have blue eyes? Number 1. Beyond Time. There is a dimension where all things exist beyond the flow of time. Some say that it is a paradise second to none. Others assert that it is an infernal place, where all manners of malicious entities reside. Only a select few have made the journey, and none appear to have returned. That place is simply known as Beyond Time, or the Beyond for short, and in it exists everything that both can and cannot be, a plane of existence where the rules that govern our world are rarely followed. That place can be described as a bizarre conglomeration of reality and simultaneous non-existence. The very fabric of space-time itself is held together with unbreakable, though bendable strings. Many of those who unknowingly yearn for such a place where all their dreams can come true. Of course, all of the demonic and maniacal beings often visit that realm as well, so all is not well. There is no ironclad way to reach this realm. However, if one delves deep into unraveling the mysteries of the occult, and is unafraid of going into the darkest, most dangerous locations involved, then they may just find themselves beyond time. Once an individual is beyond time, there is no route back, so one must be sure that their conviction in reaching it is absolute. Despite its notoriety and ever-changing flux, Beyond Time does appear to have numerous locations that are solid and do not move. One of these places is Dire Forest, a place where all evil is said to have originated. Another is the Forsaken Desert, where the seemingly barren wastes contain deadly mirages. Enigma Plain is well known for its confusing nature. Also, Mount Algor is said to contain the coldest and most inhospitable conditions in Beyond Time, and perhaps something more. Lastly, the Ocean of Oblivion is said to contain a hidden civilization of sea people under its merciless waves. These are but a handful of the locations that seem to exist permanently in the Beyond. Despite its inscrutable nature, you may be wondering how I have come to know all this. Well, the answer is quite simple, although it may shock you to your very core. Nevertheless, you, my dear listener, deserve to know. I am a being who is now beyond simple existence, and is capable of transcending space and time. I am the only one who can go to beyond time and back, for I am the only one capable of overseeing it in its entirety. Just who am I, you ask? I am the creator of Beyond Time, and I go by many names and titles across the plethora of realms. However, on this mortal plane, I am known as the Time Master. My power is absolute in the Beyond, so if you should ever find yourself there, know that you exist in my domain, and I will not tolerate any infractions. Judgment will be handed down quickly and mercilessly, for those who have defied me trouble me no more. Thus, let it be known that the Beyond is a realm of infinite possibilities, but this freedom comes at a price. And there you have it. That was my collection of 13 creepypastas for this year's Halloween special. I certainly hope you enjoyed your time here, and I hope you have a fantastic Halloween night. If you did enjoy this video, make sure you leave a like and a comment, and you can always subscribe if you haven't already. Check me out on social media, or donate to my Patreon, or take a look at my merch store. Thanks for watching, everyone. Happy Halloween. Stay awesome. Goodbye.